Folks will often ask what the difference is between a racial fetish and something like race play, which is a subset of BDSM or kink. In a race play scene, the participants choose to enter into a particular scene that has to do with highlighting certain kinds of power dynamics or power play indexed to the participants' races. So it might involve a variety of different kinds of encounters. The crucial point here, first, is that the participants are choosing to enter into this scene, right? So there's a matter of choice that is a central component of race play that is nowhere present in racial fetishes. Racial fetishes are imposed upon those targeted by the fetish without their knowledge or consent. There's no agency granted to the folks who are being fetishized. More than this, though, we can actually look at the dynamics and the composition of what goes on in a race play scene. So, as we've talked about in the BDSM videos, a lot goes into setting up and performing a scene. First, the participants discuss it ahead of time. There has to be, again, knowledge of what people are entering into. There need to be certain kinds of scaffolding in place, preferably in the form of, at the very least, a simple safe word, preferably the red, yellow, green light safe word system. There needs to be ways of attending to all of the participants' well-being all the way through this scene. So even if the race play scene involves something like using derogatory language directed at someone in virtue of their racialized identity, the person who's using that derogatory language doesn't simply have free reign to just say whatever. They need to be constantly checking on the person who is being positioned in the lower end of this power differential within the scene. There needs to be constant attending to and monitoring of everybody's well-being throughout the scene. After the scene ends, there needs to be this whole process of aftercare, of checking in, not just on how everyone's doing, but debriefing and discussing how things went, recognizing that scenes often involve, particularly intense physical or emotional experiences. And so making sure that sort of the drop off from those experiences is attended to. So there's, again, this constant checking in. It's a collaborative activity in the ways that fetishization doesn't involve collaboration. However, someone still might look at this scene and ask a very, I think, well-founded question about, well, what keeps the scene from spilling over, right? So we just talked about implicit biases and the ways in which being subject to, a set of associations over and over and over could foster those associations. So we might ask questions about whether, even if it's consensual, something like a race play scene might, maybe unintentionally, be fostering these kinds of pernicious or harmful implicit associations. Here's where we start to look at the phenomenology of something like a race play scene. That means the phenomenological experience, what it is to experience, to move through that scene. So let's think about this. Somebody is talking to a sexual partner or partner about their fantasies or desires. That first of all involves taking them seriously. That involves listening to them. That involves fundamentally seeing them as a person who has moral status, as a full-fledged person. Because if you don't really take them seriously as a person, you're probably not going to listen to their fantasies, right? It involves attending to their well-being throughout the scene. It doesn't involve viewing them as somebody who actually is worthy of being degraded, or viewing yourself as somebody who is worthy of being degraded. It involves a level of trust and care that is present, again, throughout the scene. And it involves attending to the participants' well-being afterwards in a way that is fundamentally incompatible with the kind of racial fetishes that we've been discussing. The kind of racial fetishes we've been discussing involve this kind of dehumanization. Whereas when people are working together collaboratively to construct this kind of race play scene, it involves fundamentally recognizing the humanity in one another. Now, of course, sometimes things do go importantly wrong, but I do want to be clear, when they go importantly wrong, it's not because it was a race play scene or because it was an instance of BDSM. It went importantly wrong, maybe because folks were unable to put the right kind of safety precautions in place, or because people weren't doing the things they're supposed to be doing in terms of attending to and recognizing one another's humanity and well-being. And that's not a feature of BDSM or a feature of race play. That is a feature of people being assholes, right? Uh, and so that people being assholes will show up regardless of what the sexual interaction is. Folks who are trying to use something like a race play scene as an excuse to act out instances of racism typically are not actually treating their sexual partner or partners as being worthy of care and respect, right? So they're already fundamentally failing at the basic requirements of what goes into an interaction like this. So it's important to recognize the differences in how, first, racial fetishes, and second, things like race play, not only the differences that they require or call for in terms of folks being able to choose to enter into these situations, but also, on top of that, the phenomenology or the lived experience of what it is like to navigate those types of scenes or experiences. And the phenomenological experience of moving through something like a race play scene fundamentally involves seeing the person you're engaging with as a person in a way that doesn't foster those kinds of dehumanized implicit biases that we are concerned about. However, it's worth continuing to think more about whether there are features of our interactions or of our social world that might be fostering these dehumanized associations or representations in ways that we might be less alert to or less aware of, and to continue to think about what we might do to intervene